Hello, I'm here with my co-designer Eric Farmer,
And I'm here with my co-designer, Eli Kurtz.
and this is a how to play video for our tabletop RPG of melodramatic relationships and violent confrontations, Sword Opera.
So let's take a look at the different kinds of roles in sword opera and see how they work in play. We're going to have action rolls, fortune rolls, resource rolls.
Okay.
All right. So we find ourselves in a tavern on the island of San Mercurio.
hmm
You're playing Portia, the lieutenant of a circle of sword-wielding paragons called the School of the Ox.
Okay.
All right. Your goal, you're trying to recruit the tavern keeper, Louisa, to the cause of your circle, which is dangerous because this tavern is in the part of the territory of the dreaded noble house Montecchi.
Boo!
Boo.
Boo!
All
Okay.
right. To make matters more complicated for you, the tavern keeper has quite a handsome son, Ahmed.
Mm.
Mm.
Okay.
So what do you do?
So I walk into the tavern. It's a little nicer than I'm used to. My circle is not nearly as prestigious as House Montecchi, and so I'm pretty excited to be here and maybe find some way to recruit it to our cause instead of the rich patrons that they currently have. So I'm going to walk up to Louisa and say, Tavern keeper, a bottle of your finest wine, please.
And she looks you over because you don't look like the kind of person that can afford this kind of bottle of wine.
No, I'm pretty
Uh,
scrappy.
Yeah, but you strike up a conversation with her. You're a stranger here, and she always wants to meet strangers.
hmm
Sort of being personable and uh, inquisitive is part of being a tavern owner,
hmm
right? People come in for the chat, so you start talking, and I think like part that will be part of this action role that we're going to make here
hmm
is probably the acquisition of that bottle of wine, but also maybe this relationship between you and Louisa flowering into something, maybe not romantic, but certainly cordial,
Yeah.
rather than just being strangers. So in sword opera, whenever you meet a moment of conflict or connection that's worth it, we make an action roll.
hmm
And the very first step is that you need to pick an action that you want to use.
hmm
So in this conversation that we're having with Louisa, what action do you want to use to connect with her?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna go with Bond on this one.
Okay,
I
makes
have,
sense to me.
yeah, I have one die in Bond, and that feels like the most appropriate action to me.
All right, sounds good. So I don't think there's anything in your favor going against you. I think your abilities are fine for this. So we're just going to go with what our standard is, which is risky standard.
Okay, cool.
Okay. All right. Now, do we want to shine a spotlight? So we have some extra things that we can do.
hmm
If you would like, you may use the power arts, your special abilities here. If you had another paragon here, you could use teamwork.
hmm
Uh, or our third option is you can tempt fate, which is where you get to demand an extra benefit on top of the actions goal in exchange for a guaranteed consequence. So, do any of those sound good to you?
Yeah, see, the thing is, I want to recruit this tavern to my cause, but I'm also somebody with my own ambitions, and Ahmed is looking pretty good over there. And so I think that no matter what, the charm that I display to recruit Louisa or like get her to give me this bottle of wine, open up this relationship, I also want to use it to catch Ahmed's attention and let him know that there's some pretty hot stuff over at the bar.
Ooh, all right. All right, that sounds great. All right, let's roll the dice. You have your one die in bond.
Yeah, well, let's see how this goes.
All right,
I got a five.
a five. Okay, so your action occurs, but there's going to be some consequences.
hmm
But you're chatting with Louisa,
hmm
and you kind of win her over. And against her better judgment, she's like, "Okay, let's take this bottle down. Let's take a chance on this stranger."
hmm
And so she uncorks this slightly dusty bottle, and kind of at that moment, the conversation in the tavern dies just a little bit so that the pop of the cork out of the bottle kind of catches everyone's attention.
Mm-hmm.
And you can feel a bunch of eyes on you at that point.
Okay.
One very attractive set of eyes with some lovely uh, long eyelashes is Ahmed. He's out moving between the kitchen and the serving floor and sees you and gives you kind of like the up down.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Um, but you also hear a a chair kind of push out loudly from the table.
Mm-hmm.
And as you're engaging in banter with Louisa, sharing this very fine bottle of wine, you feel a meaty hand on your shoulder um, come down and spin you around.
Okay, cool. And I imagine, like, I'm a paragon of the power arts, and one of the power arts is sense. And I walked in and I could sense that if there were any other paragon auras in this room, they were kind of dim or whatever. So, whatever was happening with this guy didn't really register on my radar. But I think as he was walking up, I could feel the power aura kind of like growing behind me. So, I'm not caught completely unawares, but I'm still, I think, surprised whenever I get turned around bodily and there's somebody up in my face.
And you turn around and you come sort of face to top of head with Montalvo,
Okay.
who is this sort of short. He's built like a fire plug, right? Like he's not very tall, but he's broad shouldered. His face has seen some actions. He's got some scars and stuff on it, but it's also seen some action of the putting back the goblets of wine action. His nose is bright red.
Hmm.
He's a little unsteady on his feet, and you could just smell the alcohol kind of coming off of him. And he gets right up in your face, and he says, "Why don't you go back to your paddock, Ox? This is Montecchi territory. We don't need you schmoozing around our taverns here. Go back to your hovels."
Geez. Okay. Well, I think I'm going to maybe get up and move to the middle of the room. I think everybody knows what's going to be happening at this point, and I'm going to draw my sword and say, "If you want me to leave, why don't you make me, Montecchi?"
And this is you've made his day. This
Ugh,
is what he wants.
okay.
He was deep in his cups earlier, but now he has the courage that only a bottle of wine can give a fella.
Uh huh.
And he pulls out his sword, and you can tell by his stance and how he's holding the blade that like he's got some experience under his belt.
Okay.
He's clearly not like in full fighting shape,
Hmm.
but he is certainly determined.
Okay.
Um, so I think the we do hear the scrape of tables and chairs getting pushed out of the way, knocked over as people kind of clear out of the range. Dimly, you can hear Luisa yelling at Montalvo to not cause trouble, to not destroy her bar like he did last time. Um, as the clash of steel happens, and you and Montalvo come together, blade to blade, um, and I think he gives you a surprisingly solid shove backwards with his blade.
Cool.
And yeah, and you can feel his power aura sort of growing
Hmm.
as the combat sort of like starts. And
Okay.
so you get a little extra oomph to that shove, catching you a little bit off guard. What would you like to do?
Sure. Well, it just so happens that in the power arts, my power specialty is flex, which is the super strength kind of approach, right? And so, what I want to do, he shoved me back, and it seemed like his power aura flared like he was going to do that. I'm going to show him what flexing really means.
Ooh,
And
all right.
so, I'm just going to like put my boot in his chest and kick him across the room.
All right. So, what action do you want to use to engage your flex.
I think this is Defy, and unfortunately,
Okay.
I have no dice in Defy.
Okay. So when you have 0 dice, you'll take 2 dice, you'll roll them, and you'll take the lowest. But let's go through the whole process here
That sounds good.
first. Okay. So I think we're just going to leave this. I think you two are reasonably evenly matched. We're going to keep the threat and effect risky standard.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to shine a spotlight? Particularly, it sounds like power arts might be kind of useful here.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, this
Okay.
is no merely narrative use of the power arts. And in fact, like being a selfish game player, I don't have any dice that I'm rolling right now. I want to roll some dice. So
Let's roll
I'm
some.
going to use the power arts for sure.
All right. How many dice of your pool of art dice would you like to use on this roll?
Yeah, I have 2 art dice that I could use, and I'm going to use both of those on this roll
Okay.
because I really want a clean success on this thing.
Okay. So you had 0.
Mm-hmm.
Now you have 2. You're going to roll those. Normally, if you also had dots in the action,
Mm-hmm.
you would use 2 different color dice to differentiate them. We don't have to do that in this case.
Sure. Although, for
Okay.
what it's worth, I do have specially colored dice for my power arts, so I am going
Well,
to.
you might as well use them.
Might as well.
All right. So let's go ahead and make the roll, and then we'll face some
Okay,
consequences.
so I've got my 2 dice, and here I go. I've rolled, and I got a 4 and a 5.
A 4 and a 5. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So your action occurs, but there's consequences. There's consequences to everything. Also, because you're a practitioner, those dice are going to go away until they refresh. If you had rolled a 6 on any of those, you would have gotten to keep any of those power arts dice that showed a 6.
Sure, yeah. I don't have
All
a
right.
super high power level right now in the power arts, and so it makes sense that I would need to get rid of both of these. It's just like maybe putting my all into the blow.
Right.
Cool.
So you put your boot on his chest and you give him a flex empowered kick, and it's like a horse kicked him. Right,
Hmm.
he slides across the floor, and I think hits the kind of saloon style doors
Hmm.
uh, that they swing open, and he lands in a heap. Unfortunately, he lands in a heap right at the feet of some other Montecchi guards
Okay. And I
that are just kind of getting off shift here.
and I think they can hear me shout from inside the tavern, "And
Yeah,
stay out, you trash."
right. Yeah. So I'm going to assign you some crisis harm here.
Ugh.
You have a fairly large threat looming with a powerful circle, the
Uh-huh.
Montecchis. So I'm going to assign you a level 2 crisis harm.
Okay.
I think targeted by the Montecchis is what we'll call this.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. Would you like to resist?
Um well, tell me about Crisis Harm.
Okay. So crisis harm fills up your harm grid just like regular harm.
Okay.
So if you could take injury, if you take any kind of social challenge, if you're that all goes in your harm grid.
Mhm.
Crisis harm is a special kind that represents a looming problem for your character,
Okay.
and it makes it more easy for you to be ruined. Okay. It also can't be healed except through proactive action to take care of it. So it will just stick there and cause you problems.
Okay, got it. Yeah, in that case, I I will accept the crisis harm, but level 2 is higher than I would like. I'm not sure that I can get out of here if I have harm that bad. So I would like to resist that to maybe make it
Okay.
a little milder.
What attribute would you like to use? We have ambition or loyalty.
Yeah, so Defy is the action that I rolled, and that is an action under Ambition. I know I'm not like married to that necessarily, but it doesn't seem like I'm doing this out of loyalty per se. Maybe recruiting the tavern to my cause is a loyal thing, but fighting this guy feels a little more selfish. So I think resisting with Ambition makes sense.
That makes sense to me. So roll however many dice are in that first column there, and we will see. This will automatically succeed.
Hmm.
You will resist. Maybe not fully, but you will resist. but this will let us know how much stress you take.
Got it. Okay. Well, I only have one die in that column, so I'm really cutting it close yet again. But let's see how this goes. Maybe I'll get lucky. Nope, I got a 2.
A 2. Okay. So the 1 to 3 result means that you take 2 stress.
Okay.
All right. The higher you roll, the less stress you take.
Yeah. And I've only got 6 stress, so 2 is significant. All right.
Right. Yep. So you need to marshal those resources. So we're going to drop it to a level 1 crisis harm.
Okay.
All right. So I think that that's more of like a nuisance. It's still crisis. It still can escalate and get worse. It is currently more of a nuisance.
Okay. All right.
But now you're faced with a situation where there's a bunch of Monteki guards coming in, and they see that you've roughed up one of their own. He may be a drunken lout, but he's one of their drunken louts. So how do you want to handle this situation?
I want to use my power arts again, not as a dice roll, but I am curious. I mentioned earlier sense is one of the power arts, and I just want to see, like, how do their power auras compare to my own? Does it seem like I could take all of them myself?
I think you probably could. As you reach out with your senses, you don't detect any kind of like extra power from this group. They're just regular soldiers.
Okay.
But as a trained fighter, you know that one power art fighter against 6 or 7 people is not going to do great things for the interior design of this tavern.
Yeah.
There will be some collateral damage.
Yeah.
Which may be counter to your goal.
Yeah.
So if you want to, you can definitely take these guys on.
I am here to try and recruit the tavern keeper. I don't want to mess up the tavern keeper's thing, so I'm not going to do an action roll to attack them in this moment. I think instead, I'm a captain of the School of the Ox. I have an asset called Title Lieutenant, which means that I carry the rank of lieutenant in the school. Mechanically, it means that I have a small group of student soldiers that are at my command. And I think this isn't exactly the plan, but it's in keeping with the plan that we made. So these soldiers show up. My students are right across the street, kind of keeping an eye out, making sure that everything goes well in here. And I think whenever they see that it's not going well, they're going to come to my aid to give me a chance to get out of there.
Okay, so you're using the resources of your circle to come to your aid, and this is an action that is separate from you.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to make a special kind of fortune roll.
Okay.
Called a resource roll.
Okay.
All right, because you're using the soldiers from your circle, that falls under the remit of the general, the leader of that particular leader of your circle. Okay, so we find out how many dice you roll by looking at your personal relationship with the leader.
Okay.
So how many dice do you have with the general?
So looking at my character sheet, the best relationship that I have with the inner circle is the boss, but the general is not terrible. I have 2 dice in that relationship. It's a typical relationship.
Okay, so maybe your captaincy is fairly new.
Sure.
You haven't had a chance to necessarily prove yourself, which is why you're out here in the first place.
Yeah. And I mean,
okay,
I am generally ambitious too, so it may be that I've got designs after the general's position.
Yeah.
And there's rumors about that floating around already.
All right. Well, let's see how this resource roll goes.
Okay.
So you're just gonna take those 2 dice. You're gonna roll them. We're not gonna do anything extra to them because this is out of your hands.
Cool. And the difference between this resource roll and a fortune roll is essentially that, like, in a fortune roll, we would decide narratively how many dice I'm rolling, right?
Right. We have a little checklist that we go through that we figure out what your pool would be.
Okay.
And then we would roll them, but the end result is the same roll.
Got it. So because we know I'm using the circle's resources, we're just using that to determine our dice pool size. I've got these 2 dice, so let's see how this goes. I got 2 6s.
Oh boy. All right. So multiple sixes is a great result. So you hear out front. So there's this sort of like stunned silence
Uh-huh.
at first, right before these guards are going to come in and really try to mess you up,
Yeah.
right? There's a bit of a dramatic pause there. Um and you hear a loud like, two-finger whistle
Mm-hmm.
coming from across the street, and one of the filthiest limericks about the Mentekes you have ever heard.
Okay.
Okay?
I know which student that was.
Yeah, uh-huh. And that catches their attention, draws them away from you. Um, and you can hear your students kind of um, beating feet away, drawing this group off of you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because, hey, pal's a drunk, but we can't let this insult go unpunished on that direction either.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to give you the chance to escape. Uh, I think you see out of the corner of your eye, um, you see a little like motion, and you look over and you see Ahmed kind of holding the door to the kitchen
Yeah.
open and giving you like a hey, like come this way while those guards are distracted.
Sure. So I think I'm like making a beeline for the kitchen door. I flip a
Hmm.
coin to Louisa and I say, "Thanks for everything. Sorry for the mess." And as I'm going through the door, it's almost like I'm dancing with Ahmed. We kind of
Hmm.
like swap places in a way, right? And
Hmm.
as we're going, I whisper something to the effect of, "Well, I hate to leave so soon, but I know my cue and I hear it, and then I'm gone."
All right. And I think you leave, and we see Ahmed swoon just a little bit against the edge of the doorway.
Great, awesome. Well, thanks for leading us through these roles, Eric. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, it's always a blast to play. I hope that gives people at home a little idea of how all of these various roles work in sword opera, and we're excited to have you play it.
Yeah, happy playing out there, folks.